All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. Just before starting, just to make sure your mics are on mute, so you don't hear any noise in the background, dogs barking or propane truck guys coming in. So the talk is I slightly struggle with this because I'm an off the cuff talker. I'm not a talker following cue cards. I'm exactly like Trump, by the way, on that. And so I wanted to talk about myself. And well, I have a story to tell you guys. So it starts at the beginning, as we say. Um, so there's a jazz musician that I had said something once, which was interesting. He said, everything shapes you to be the person you are today, and sometimes hard lessons pay off dividends. And it's funny how sometimes things come back in your head with a new resonance, and that for me uh, made sense. And so, why would I add to this? You only learn from those lessons. It's only if you learn from those lessons that makes sense. So let me share a little bit with you who I am, basically. I mean, most of you don't know the story. Carlin knows it very well. I grew up below the poverty line in Montreal. Um, Grew up on the welfare system. Single parent. Left father when I was 4, and it wasn't easy. I mean, being on the welfare system, you don't get to do things like most people do. And I was a hungry kid. I was always hungry. We didn't have enough food. That's probably why we have 2 fridges and a freezer today, and it's packed to capacity. Maybe I'm compensating with that. But yeah, I would sometimes find food everywhere I could. I even ate from dumpsters. So, and I was never ashamed of that, because when you're hungry, you're never ashamed of stuff like that. So yeah, that's how it started. And for me, I always had the sense to create. So I always wanted to create. I always had the need to create. And born and raised in Montreal, it's a very artistic uh, city, and it's it's just a great city to be an artist in. Um, so I grew up in a very low income part of Montreal. It's basically a hood, and it was rough. And it's I grew up without a father, so I was always looking for something, and art was one way for me to navigate through that. And challenging circumstances, art offered an outlet for me, for my emotions as a young man, and which I couldn't rationally process. But you have those emotions, so art became a coping mechanism, a very good coping mechanism for me. And well, I was always interested in building stuff, and creating stuff. It didn't matter in medium for me. So I could use anything, and we didn't have any money, so I had to use what I had, and by whatever means, uh, because I didn't have any money to buy anything. Well, I needed to find something, so I used to go from neighbors to neighbor to neighbor, knock on the door, and ask them for leftover house paints. And remember one time my mom came in my room and I had gallons of those house paints, and it was stacked higher than my dresser. And she looked at it. She goes, "What are you going to do with this?" I said, "Well, I'm going to paint." And she shrugged off and she, "Okay." Just That's just how it was. And so I even went. I raided night raids on construction sites to go get um, materials to paint on, basically, like styrofoam panels and all that, because I didn't have anything. I have the paint now, but I needed something to paint on. So I needed to paint on surfaces, large surfaces. And I painted on styrofoam panels, which the house paint just adhered perfectly on it. And funny story is, I used to sell those paintings $5, big paintings, like they were 2x8 sheets, and people would buy them. And because they were very fragile, I used to carry them with me. And sometimes if there was a big burst of wind, it would snap it in half. And then I would look at it and go, oh no, oh wait a minute, I could sell two for $5 each now. So anyways, that's, again, it means to an end. So I painted on walls, I painted on clothing, I painted on, school walls, outside school walls, I painted on a lot of stuff. And so when I was a teenager, there was another creative aspect for me that wanted to come out, is we started a band. And we sucked, but we had fun. And it was a good time, good camaraderie. And we needed to explore. And I needed to explore a facet that I had no idea. I don't know music. We just had fun. We were goofing off, basically. But it was a good teenage years for that. That was something for me that permitted me to escape even more what I was living in. I mean, you could see in the background there, it was a little rough time there. And so that was a good time. Those were good memories. And I did so many jobs. I left home, I was 17, I did a million types of jobs. It was incredible. I worked in absolutely in everything. But then I worked with a friend of mine in the movie industry for special effects. And it was a creative aspect. And it was invigorating because for the first time in my life, I saw you can make a living out of creating something you love. And that hit me. I didn't understand how you can make it by doing something you love, but it was great. And we created masks, latex, tons of stuff, and it gave me the base of understanding materials, how they work, and different types of materials, and the interaction, and understand, because in special effects you do a lot of experimenting, and the experimenting most of the time doesn't end up well, but you learn from that, and you can ride that line of creating without destroying. And so it was a very interesting time for me, and it was fun. Worked with George Takei, Nicolas Cage, and Gary Sinise, and it was fun because you're in that environment, and you can only be in that environment if you work there, if you're in there. If you're outside, you don't know how movies are really made, and you don't understand how much work it is, and how much boring it is too, because we used to sit on sets for 10 hours doing nothing, just waiting, just in case there was a little mishap with the makeup or something. So, yep. So that was fun. And then eventually, moved to Toronto. And I started painting more regularly. And I had a little studio in the garage. I used to work on boards, and then when I used to turn them, I used to hit stuff all the time. But that didn't matter. I was just painting. I was just having a good time. And one time we just walked on Queen Street, and Queen Street at the time, and that was 2003, it was buzzing with galleries. It was exciting. It was galleries, gallery openings. You would go from one gallery to another with a glass of wine. We had Nuit Blanche at the time. They would close off the street. it was invigorating, and we've met so many people there. Made so many artist friends there that to this day, we're all over the place, painting in different places and galleries. But that's where we started, and that's where I started. And we came in this gallery, and they were doing just an open call for artists. Just brought my stuff in and started showing, and took off. And 6 months later, we had a solo show, and sold out on opening night. And I was giggling nonstop. It was just incredible. When you create something that is personal, that is innate, that comes out easily for you, and that makes you feel good, and then you make a living out of that, you go like, is this real? This doesn't make any sense to me. Still to this day, I have to pinch myself when I go in the studio, because I worked in construction for 18 years before doing this professionally, full time. So I know real life work. I understand it. I went through shitty jobs, trust me, shitty jobs, things that were then and I worked when I think I was 19 in the Port of Montreal on a tanker, and we had to clean the tanks where all the diesel was. And it was the low end, I think, of my life at that point. I was just scraping the bottom of that tank with a dust mask with the diesel fume all around me. We had to come out every hour because we would get dizzy. And at that point, I thought, this is not what I want to do in my life. I need to do something. So I used it as a motivation for me. So, and the way that I looked at it, it was only one way up from there, out of the tank, so to speak. So, and then, well, as things are, when it started my career, I met Carl and Barbara in Oeno Gallery, and we had a good discussion, the first discussion. And if I remember, Carlin, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Barbara told you, because I contacted you guys, and Barbara said to you, you need to talk to this guy. And you contacted me.
That's exactly right. We did reach out and contact you and said, we want your work. And it's very interesting to see those pictures of the old gallery, our first gallery. That's wild. You look so young. I look so young. What happened?
Well, that's the art world. It ages you faster. But that was a great time. You guys had a great place there. For me, it was just meeting friends, long lost friends. And we had a good time, and then it started from there. It was friendship at the beginning. We stayed at your house. We had fun with a snapping turtle there that almost took my finger off. Boy, those things are nasty. And so it was great. So, I mean, and then at the beginning, for me, painting at the beginning was therapeutic. Well, art is always therapeutic for me. But at the beginning, I think because I was going on bigger format, the medium was finally coming to what I wanted to express. You could see the emotion in the, I had a lot of inner emotions that I needed to bring out. And I'm an instinct painter. I go with my instinct, and I think logically afterwards. And I just go. And these were therapeutic in a way that I think I had anger to come that wanted to come out. I needed to channel that, and I had a lot of maybe sadness, struggles, and I wanted to bring something that felt good for me on boards. And I think it worked. For me, it did. It was a perfect venue for me to bring everything out. It was channeling everything out. And once I started painting, I was painting from 8 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't stop. And at that time, we were in downtown Toronto. That house, we were in the basement. And I swear to you, we had fluorescent lights, but they were so low, I would hit my head. And I'm not a tall guy, I'm 5'11", but I would hit my head. So those paintings are pretty big. How many times did I I broke some lights just by moving them around, and it didn't matter though. It didn't matter because I was doing exactly what I felt I should be doing, and that was just great. Um, and I was heavily influenced by things that surrounded me, and subconsciously, it's influenced me. Um, I was born and raised in the hood. For me, the country, the forests, lakes, rivers was foreign, but I longed for it. When I was there, I felt rejuvenated because I was concrete and steel and asphalt, and that's where I grew up. So it had a magical aspect for me. So when I was creating that, I was maybe combining the two of them, and it came out with my emotion, but what I was maybe longing for. And I was working with a lot of different materials, materials that were unorthodox, acrylic, tar, metals, acid oxidizing agents, and patinas, and they were raw for me. They felt good, so I needed to do that. So, and my art, if it was accidentally beautiful, I wasn't looking for beauty. I to this day, I don't look for beauty when I do art. It's if it's beautiful, if you find it beautiful, it's a byproduct of it. I just do what feels good to me. And when I did those landscapes, if you look closely, you can see they're landscapes, but go deeper and it's a bit ominous. So I needed that innuendo to come out. And it felt good. Sorry, I had a little thing in my throat there. And my life has always been about exploration. I always worked with so many different materials. Materials that are not meant to be, or I don't know if I could say that, meant to be artistic. I think every material can be artistic, depending how you work with it. But that was not their primary purpose, to be used as art material. And it was just fun to work with different materials at the time. And those materials that I use would come out, I think, okay. I think I was happy with it. And as you can see, there was different exploration. I never liked being boxed into one thing. I mean, my life is like that. I'm not a in-box type of guy. I like to be outside of the box. I lived outside of the box. I thrive outside of the box. If I'm in the box, it's slow death for me. For me, it is. And I like to create different things, taking chances, and going where I feel it's the direction I should be going. And that's my life. It's taking chances and being opportunistic. Otherwise, probably I wouldn't have made it out of the neighborhood where I was, which a lot of the friends at the time didn't make it out. And it's funny enough, some became drug dealers, some became cops. So I guess it's polar opposites. It's funny because I see that creativeness in my younger son. He creates everything, with everything. And it's amazing because I think when you have children, you see snippets of what was possibly your life when you were young. And my mother and my dad are no longer with us. And so I don't have anybody to ask, was I like that? Did I do this? And I'm sure I did, because I sit with my son and there's a genetic memory there. But he creates stuff out of everything. And I'm amazed by that, because I'm wondering if it's nature versus nurture, or is it something that you're influenced to, or is it something that comes out naturally? And it's amazing. It's amazing to be a father or a parent, to see that in your children. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the last show I had with Oeno, not 2019, but 2010, was Ethos. And Ethos was the culmination of all of what I've been talking about. All of that, the type of materials, the direction, how I was painting, the emotion, all of that came on a very raw canvas. And for me, it was sort of a full circle. And Carlin, I'm going to say something very sudden. Bless her heart. she saw a painting. I loved it. She loved it, but we weren't sure if it was, going to be commercially successful. But she always encouraged me on everything, even if it didn't make much sense, or she just, she encouraged me on everything. She said, I'd love to have a show. And I was utterly surprised because I thought it was very daring. And she said, let's have a show. I love the painting. I think it's very strong and all that, and we should do it. I said, okay. So we did the show. It was okay. It looked good. It felt good. It was probably one of the most personal show I've ever done. Yeah. Because that year my mom died, and for me it was a full circle. Everything, all the emotions and everything. And it's funny because ethos in Greek it means custom, character. Aristotle referred to it as to a man's character as personality, as balance between passion and caution, and like I said earlier, I paint from emotion. I think afterwards, and it works. So I trust my gut when it comes to that, probably more than my head. But it worked on that end for that. And and that year we relocated to Calgary too. So a lot of changes that year, and sort of a closing through a circle that was long. And the hiatus for me, it's being a parent and working with stuff and with my kids and going back to some of my roots of the costumes that I made for them were for, my movie years, going back to colors that I did years and years ago. I felt colorful after that. I felt colorful again. And just doing creative work with them and putting them to work cheaply. So I could say, doesn't cost a lot, just candy. And it felt great being a parent and being there. So I felt colorful. I think all the painting that I did, all the work, ethos, was all the hard stuff coming out, all the raw emotions, heavy stuff, heavy materials that I use in ethos. All of that came out. And at that point, I started doing colors again, which I have lots of colors. I always work with colors in the background. I always experimented with colors because I think with everything that I went through when I was young, I always had a sense of optimism, an outlook, looking forward. And I think colors for me did all that. And I felt colorful, and I needed to feel colorful again and coming out. And if any of you went to Quebec, people love their colors there. All their houses are colorful inside. And so it's, that was fun. And that was the colors coming out. And I needed to experiment again, or I feel coming back to my roots. So I experimented with sculpture, and that's what I did when I was doing special effects. When we did foam latex, we sculpted the different reptilians or aliens that we had at the time, and it was fun. So I worked with those materials, but at that time I never thought I could do art out of that. For me, it was just fun building that. So I went back and I worked with it. And again, Carlin said, they're great, like, let's show them. And I said, are you sure? Because this is for me personal. I love playing with that, but I'm not sure if it's something it's artistically I want to show. And she said, yeah, let's have a look. They're great. So again, I was supported by her, and that was great. And it felt great working with 3D, which is very different than with a painting. You work around. You have to understand the sculpture on every aspect. Every aspect says something different, and it has to mean something too. So it was pretty much that. And I wanted to go back to painting, and I wanted to do my colors, but they needed to mean something to me first and foremost. And when I went back to the studio and blank canvas, the ultimate fear of every artist is staring at a blank canvas, and boy, staring at a blank canvas, where to start when there's nothing. But I needed colors. So I started experimenting, and I went back to drawing that I hadn't done in a long time, because my earlier work was directly on canvas, just letting it go. And I needed to draw. I needed to understand color again, very bright colors. That's how I felt. And I did so many drawings, like stacks of drawings. Everywhere we went, I drew. And it was just great. And for me, I needed to relearn how I approached art too. Because I had an idea. Like most artists, we start with an idea and then you formulate it. And I wanted to go in this direction, but I felt I needed to relearn to paint, to approach art, to approach paint itself, or to understand it. So I needed to, for me, develop a new way of painting that I could express. It was a means to an end, so basically, again. So the first time for a long time, I started to sketch and being more methodical in my process too. Trying to understand more and more. And that was more than 2 years of just processing. And I had, like everything, all the art that I did, it had to have a meaning. It had to have an emotion. It had to mean something to me. And I think most artists, it has to be personal. It can't be superficial. It has to mean something. And it has to mean something for the artist first. For me, it had to mean something. It had to come viscerally. It has to be something. And I felt color. And I felt like color. And I wanted to do colors. I wanted to do something that was joyful, but had a meaning in life. And I always painted with innuendos. I always painted with subtle messages, so to speak. Not really a messagery, but subtleties of life. The shading, which everything casts a shadow on everything you do in life, whether your experience, so who you're with, your life that surrounds you. There's shadowing on that. And then there's, for me, the overlapping of colors. The overlapping of colors, and which from day to day, your emotion changes. The lines, which are linear moments in your life, which is getting up, going to work, eating, going to bed, and stuff like that, which not happening right now for everybody, but that's what it meant at the time. It still does. And social, I don't know if I could, some social commentary too, about the life that surrounds us, that surrounds me. Patches of darkness, but surrounded by color, or color surrounded by darkness. And, I did a lot of different types of paintings with color and the darkness, which overlaps, and it has to be something for me that explains where I'm coming from, my life. And for me, as I was sitting in the studio and looking at them, thinking more logically about the painting, afterwards, I started to see more about myself in there. And the shadows that for me are my past, colors that are my present and future, lines that are maybe directions of where I'm going. When I do the edges, which are sort of they're airbrush, and there's a background history behind this painting. There's something in the back of this. There's more to this story than what it seems. And for me, I wanted to do that. I wanted to create something that was personal, not an enhanced photo thing. It's just something that, sorry, there was a buzz there for a second. I wanted to have a struggle between dark and light. The fine line, the gray, where we live mostly our lives, and then the pure joys of moments of intense emotion that we have in our lives, and some sorrow and maybe struggle in the darkness and so on. So I wanted to do something that was similar to what I did before, but with colors. The struggle that the art that I did before was very obviously, there was a struggle in there. These are more subtle because I think we get more subtle with age, or some of us do, and or we hide it better. The art that I'm doing now feels like it's, how should I put it? Very joyful, but with the subtleties of life. When I work with the layers, it's layers of experience. It's depth, it's movement. There's a lot of things in there that for me explains life. And the white dots are episodes in my life that cast a shadow on everything else. They move around, they linger, they're dots, they're moments. Could be anything, but it's something significant. When I work with the shadows for me, when they overlap the color, well, it diminishes maybe the previous experience. I don't know if that makes much sense, but there's a lot of things going on in this and my life, basically. So my son came one day, went shopping, and he came back with a T-shirt that was Bob Ross on it. And I thought, I used to watch Bob Ross on PBS when I was younger. And I didn't really like what he was doing, but I liked how he was doing it and how he felt doing it. And I connected to that. And it was one of those episodes which I think everybody, or one of those shows which everybody can relate to, is where you watch, it's not great, you don't really like it, but for some reason you're stuck and you're looking at it because there's something in there you can't explain and you're just looking at it. And I used to try to find when he was on in the TV guide, if you guys remember TV guides. And I used to trying to figure out when he was on. And it was PBS in Montreal, and we didn't always have it. But when he was on it, I used to watch him. And he used to say, every day is a good day when you paint. And it's funny how life is a full circle, because now we have a song, PBS did a song of Bob Ross, and it's a great song, and it's every day is a good day when you paint. And my kids love that song. We put it in the car. We listen to that song. And this is true, I listen to it in the studio. It's just great to listen. And it is a good day when you paint. It is an absolutely good day when you paint. And so in my, I don't know if this makes much sense, but in my closing, I'd like to say that I truly believe that everything shapes you to be the person you are today. Sometimes art lessons pay off dividends, and for me it did. Would I change anything in my life? Absolutely not. Good and bad, everything made me who I was today. And for me, the process of creating will always stay with my gut, my instinct, and my emotion, and that's how I do art. That's why I need to be around everywhere and do everything. No matter the medium, I'll always create from instinct. So this works for me. So, and that being said, I have to say, Carlin, thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel it's a grand gift exchange, but I'm on the receiving end, so it's good. Thank you.
So if you guys have any questions, just let me know. I'm open to questions. If this lecture made any sense, I'm open to questions and answers.
So then, could you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
If you do that, then we can see everybody again.
Can you take control again?
I'll try and do that. Yep. And thank you very, very much, because that was a very honest and you were generous in sharing a lot of your own life with us, and I thank you very much for that, Sylvain.
Mm-hmm.
You have a question? Can you speak up? Or a comment?
Sylvain?
Oui.
Thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. I appreciate the personal touch and your very insightful ways of observing your own life. That's greatly appreciated. I was curious to find out from you if there are any important artist mentors that you have particularly learned from during this entire process, because I find when I work, I'm never alone. I find that there are so many other artists that have supported me as well, whether living or dead. So I was wondering, how do you feel about that?
That's a very good question. Merci, Alice. Which I was asked several times before. And sharing more is, for me, is my story. I grew up without knowing art. I wasn't introduced to it. I think I stumbled into it myself eventually. So I learned later on a lot of things, mainly about artists, some artists. I was influenced by so many type of artists. It's I had one end, Frank Stella. I always liked artists from the 60s. Frank Stella. Yeah, oh God, now I'm gonna have a brain fart. But from that era, what's the other guy? Ellsworth Kelly. The older artists of that coloring from that era, where they use color profusely. And in Montreal, Guido Molinari, a bunch of artists from that age, from that time, from the late 50s, when they use color a lot. And then I love artists that were using very dark, earthy colors. Anselm Kiefer is one of them. I love the materials. I love the rawness of what he was doing. Richard Serra, his steel sculpture, which was ominous, which was immense and could not be overlooked because they were just there. And then I love, what was his name again? I'm not a brain fart. Not Tucker. Very British, beautiful paintings of landscapes, lush, colorful, and
Turner.
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 How can I forget that? And Turner, when he was painting from the side of his brush, and he could capture an emotion with just a brush stroke, and that for me was confidence that in a lot of things. And so there's a lot of artists that, and I have very modern artists, Anselm Rail, I think is his last name, how it's pronounced. A lot of artists that are working with very avant-garde materials too. So I'm a bit all over the place when it comes to that because they're interesting. And again, because of who I am, I'm not caught in one thing where I need to explore. I do need to explore. It's very, very important. And it's funny because, quick anecdote, Saturday night, me and the family were just had enough of being cooped up, and we're close to the mountains from the Rockies. We went driving in the Rockies, just on the road in the mountain. There's no one, nothing there, and we just wanted to go explore. We just wanted to go somewhere where we've never been before, and we've never been on that road. So we do have that need to explore. So if that answers your question.
It certainly does. I mean, understand the blankness in the brain as well, because it's hard to remember everybody who is there with you. But thank you. I appreciate that. The core, you speak from the core, and I greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone is asking about the materials that you were using, Sylvain, when you were sculpting, and what sort of journey did you take to create those sculptures that you showed us earlier?
So when I did my little episode in the movie industries, we were working with clay as a base material in order to start making molds and so on and sculpt out of. So I went back to that. I went back to clay. I worked with clay, did my models, and working around. And that was fun because that was 30 years ago. So I needed to learn how to sculpt in a certain way to get the features that I needed to. And I was working with clay, and then when we did the clay, we fired it up, and we did bronzes, and that for me was a new thing because bronzes is it's temperamental material, and you need to work with somebody that is very knowledgeable about that, doing patinas and all that. So, but what was great is working in a 3-dimension, just moving it around, you moving around, and the piece is always interacting with you because you move around it, and it says something differently each time you look at it in a different perspective. Especially when you have eyes in a sculpture, the eyes at one point look at you, directly at you, but then it moves away, and it's like you're out of context and where you don't matter anymore. But the sculpture looks in a direct direction, but you still are looking at it, and you move around it, and it's like staring at somebody that's not looking at you anymore on the street, because for whatever reason. You keep looking at that person, and that person keeps walking away. Their focus is somewhere else. But you are looking at that person, oh, nice hat or nice scarf. So that's, I don't know if that answers again, but I try to do my best. Any more questions?
So we do have a few minutes if you've got some other questions. Cheryl, were you going to say something?
I was, thank you. What does your workday look like, Sylvain?
That is a good question. My workday. Well, I'm the breakfast maker in this house. So I make breakfast for everybody. And then I go in the studio. And I think artists in general, when you go in the studio, it feels like my universe. You come in and it's your universe. And I'm the Lord and Master here. And you start to feel at ease and you create. And so I feel good when I go in the studio. And because of the times we're in right now, everybody's in our house. My 2 boys, my wife works from the office, which I had to kick her out this morning because I said, hey, I'm important too. So I needed to do this. And just fine. And so the kids come in, and there's an interaction which is more obvious because of the times we're in. And they come in, and we talk about art a bit more. The other day, I had my youngest son, Ollie, in the studio working with me. He just burst in, comes in, and goes, I want to paint with you. I said, okay, well,
Mhm.
let's set you up, set a table up. Without telling him, I gave him my leftover paint, and he started painting with it. And he was really, really happy. And there's something when you share something that's very intimate for an artist, creating, painting with somebody you love. There's a connection that's there. And it was just great. He was very productive. As you saw in the photo, he was super productive. I was doing my thing, and that's pretty much our days that we have. Oh, and I nap on the couch sometimes. Sorry, Carlin, can't hear you.
Sorry, I had my mute button on there. So I'm just wondering what other questions, comments, observations you might have. Elise?
Thank you. Sylvain, you seem to be a very methodical person. So I noticed all the paints are pre-mixed and they're well labeled and everything. This must be Sylvain Louis-Seize, the assistant of the master. Is it? Do you do that, or do you have it pre-done?
No, not for you to notice. No, they're homemade brews. So especially now, the work that I'm doing, I'm working with different shades of the same color. I'm working with different shades of it. So I have tons and stacks of little canvas boards that I experiment with different shades of the same color, because they have to mean. Every single color, there's a meaning for it. So when I put it on the canvas, there's a very definite meaning for that. So, and I do color proofing with that, trying to understand, because the way that I work now, I sketch, and then I sketch on the iPad, and I do color proofing, and from that I create my paint. In the color proofing, it's like I said, it's all home brews. I mix my paint and I catalog it, and I have several catalogs of types of paints, coloring, and the types of mix that I use for that. So it has to be very precise, so that when I paint, I bring all the paint out and I go with my shades of colors that I need for that. So it was a lot of work.
I'd say wow to that.
Thank you.
Wow. I mean, this is very methodical. I mean, you're following your own recipe.
Yeah, it's a bit clinical too.
Yes, so it is. I mean, I have a very different working approach, so I found it very interesting to see your studio interior. And may I ask, are they acrylic paints?
Yes, all acrylic paints, which is something that I wanted to have consistency, big word, and I wanted to elaborate from just one medium this time, which in the past I used several at the same time. Maybe it was a question of control, maybe under being more precise. I think it was, and that's where I'm at right now. Yes. Thank you for the question.
Sylvain. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Lola Tostavan, you're being uncharacteristically silent back there.
I'm just very impressed. I'm very happy to have listened to Sylvain. I think us French Canadians have something very special. Thank
We
you,
agree.
Sylvain. It was lovely. Great presentation.
They're rare.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much. Let me just say, Sylvain, really a big thank you. I don't understand precisely why you spent till 8:30 last night scrubbing and cleaning every inch of your studio, and then we never actually saw it. But apart from that part of the story, maybe you just needed psychologically to do that in order to tell the story. So I thank you very much for that.
Well,
I'm going
it's
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you very much.
We're going to have a little applause. Yes, a little group.
Yay.